Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC. It's me. It's me. It's the GOC. Coming to you live to tape 25 feet below the surface of the earth here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel for Chaos Corner. And this is part two, that's right, part two of Story Time with the Guardian of Chaos. We just came out of a 35-minute episode of part one. And fans, it was an unbelievable learning ability of facts, information, historical perspectives, and things that you want to know about the history of pro wrestling. The glue that holds it together in this crazy world we call pro wrestling. Big shout out to the late, great Captain Louis Albano and Burt Randolph Sugar, a match made in heaven. Shout out to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because if he's for us, nobody can be against us. As I said, part two, go back and check out part one. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit in these insane times that we're living in and here in 2024. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. My over 50 years of being a historian, researcher, scout, agent, producer, fan, Mark, that's right, I said it, a Mark. And my over 30 years in the ring as a pro wrestling manager who came out 2 and 3 times a night on every show. It took the fucking bumps, which most of you can't say. And that's why you come here, to learn things when you go to the bar, the restaurant, work, your next event, the water cooler, so you can learn things and have an educated conversation about the sport that we love. And that's right, it's a sport. So I can't thank you guys enough for being here. Much love and respect. This is my stress reliever, my distraction. So once again, check out part one. I rate that like button. Share, spread, leave a comment, inbox me, do something, for crying out loud. And as I always say, in order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. So sit back and relax. I'm on my second cup of coffee, but I have the lemon water right here to the left of me, which I guess would be the right of you on screen. I don't know. I'm as confused as a baby at Hooters, but I'm certainly as busy as a blow-up doll at a frat party, here with almost 3,000 videos on the channel. Look at the playlists. Over 1,000 subscribers, 4,000 watch hours, 500,000 views. We're growing by leaps and bounds. As I said, grab a snack, grab a beverage. School is back in session. Enjoy. Part two, the glue that holds it together. Remember the time frame here? This is over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But it still applies to today's 2024 business, which is booming. WWE's on fire. AEW holding on. They're trying. All the independents, which are the backbone of this industry, the independents are booming, especially here in the greater New England tri-state Northeast area, in the shadows of Titan Towers. There's really a lot going on. Big shout out to my boys down at Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling and the Paradise 4. You know who they are. If you're a subscriber here, if you're here all the time, we had 10,000 viewers last week. Again, I can't thank you guys enough. So sit back and relax as I bring you into my home and give you and share my knowledge from this learning tree. No green screens, no editing, no StreamYard, no whatever it is you want to call it, lab elements, stream elements, no Patreon, no paywalls. It's you and me. I mean, you could donate if you want, not necessary, but certainly appreciated. You could buy a cup of coffee, a couple bucks, you could be a member. I don't know. My number one members, the OTS Tribal Queen, big shout out. Austin Nance, my brother from another mother, there is no other. Scripps, I know you're out there. And of course, all the guys over at the Bay Resort. Hoodie Rob, Big O Otis over at Big O Gaming, Hula Grim, Future, Kratos, Lil Montana, the Midmo Smark. What a group of guys over there and what they're doing, being inspired. And as I said earlier, big shout out to the people that I work for and volunteer my time for, because they're the best in this industry. JD from New York and Off the Script. It doesn't get any better than that. The Chi-Town Smart heel Jesse. God bless you, my brother. Of course, the OG of the IWC, Don Tony, and his co-hosts, Big Kevin Castle. My brothers Hollywood, Comic Book Bob, and Johnny at the Wrestling Council. Jack Kilby and Morris Shortell over at Cheap Heat Productions. Of course, the Pro Wrestling Wire, formerly the PWZ, with the Professor Rick Del Santo. And I believe he even hooked up with Uncle Otis. I mean, I'm not sure. So if you want to learn about this industry, especially in the internet, the IWC, the pro wrestling community, you go to the guys and gals that I listen to. And I know that my fans here on the channel, according to analytics, are big fans of listening to Dutch Mantel, Jim Cornette, along with the other shows that I just mentioned. It doesn't get any better than this. And that's why you come here. Because of my 30 years in the ring. Because of over my 50 years experience. Telling the truth. Telling it like it is. To learn things. Not opinions, views, thoughts. What actually happened. That's why you're here. That's why this is unique, unedited, unscripted, as I just said. So I don't want to continue to repeat myself. Let's get on to part 2. We left off with the territories, the NWA, the WWF, and a new McMahon twist. Again, much love and respect. And sit back and enjoy the sounds. Part 2, go back, like I said, check out part 1. And all the other videos. 3,000 videos on the channel. A new McMahon twist. In 1983, Vince sold his interest in the WWF to his son, Vince the Crapper Jr. No offense, man. Lighten up, man. Kayfabe. What followed was a nationwide wrestling blitzkrieg. A take-no-prisoners war of expansion that would radically change the world of professional wrestling. That's an understatement. And we know what's happened here in 2024. Vince Jr.'s persona non grata at this moment. Triple H is running the show along with several other people and been bought out by Endeavor, Nick Khan, the UFC, Dana White, so on and so forth. And we know TK with Deep Pockets and AEW. Listen, I'm a fan of all the organizations. I'm a pro wrestling fan. So this is where we are. Remember the time frame. And speaking of wars and what's going on, how crazy is 2024? Stay mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit. I say it all the time. I repeat it all the time. Situational awareness. Close to like-minded. I almost said woke-minded because those are the idiots. Like-minded people. Tomorrow is not guaranteed for any of us. Pay attention to what's going on in this world because it's going to get ugly. And that's why we stand in faith, not fear. Continue to live your life, but be aware. I always put out my mission statement and a dose of reality of what's going on in this world. Because we're being taken from the inside out in the United States of America. Never mind what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Iran, Iraq, Syria, everything else that's going on. Because it's happening right here in this country. With all these under 30-year-olds who have their head up their ass and are elitists and what's going on around these college campuses. It was okay for one, but it's not good for the other. None of it should matter. Race, religion, culture, skin color. None of it should matter. We're all the same people. And I don't think a lot of society, especially the younger people, understand that. So let me get off my soapbox here. And if you want to learn about what's really going on in the world and supporting our military and our law enforcement and our first responders, you go over to my Two Brothers show. And that would be Hey Roma. That's right, Hey Roma. With Pretty Paul Roma and Mario Mancini on the Hey Roma podcast. That's where you'll find out what's really going on in this country. They pull no punches. They tell it like it is, just like the GOC. So go out and check that out as well. Let's get back onto the glue that holds it all together. That's me. In this crazy world we call pro wrestling. Vince Jr. was able to voyage Columbus-like, which they've tried to cancel here too, into the territories of other promoters because of the dawning of cable TV and the production values made possible by another innovation, videotape. Let that marinate. His theory was what worked in the Northeast could be exported and made to work nationally. That's right, here in the greater New England tri-state Northeast area, the birthplace of a lot of things, in the shadows of Titan Towers. And he thought it would work internationally. And take aside the asshole that he is. He's right. Oh, I apologize for that. No copyrights, no strikes. I apologize. I meant to say ass hat. I don't want to offend anybody. Kayfabe, it's my channel. I should be able to say what I want. Freedom of speech. What happened to that? I'm on a roll today. I must be butter because I'm on a roll. This is part 2. 2 cups of coffee. What do you want me to tell you? That's why you're here, for the entertainment and the factual knowledge that I present. Wow. So he declared war on other promoters and invaded or bought up all the territories. While he was carrying out this scorched earth policy, remember the time frame here and the words and the verbiage being used and what's going on in current 2024. It's all relevant. Look up to the sky. Vince Jr. was vulnerable. We did it within mirrors and with the mirrors. It was all cash flow. Had these promoters known they didn't have any money, they could have killed us. Because he didn't have any money, if you know the history of WrestleMania 1 and the money he got from Jim Crockett Promotions, the $1 million that he desperately needed. But the point is, they didn't know. And even if they had, it's doubtful that the disorganized organization known as the NWA, which I really grew up on besides the WWF, big fan, I loved that territory and that company. Really was incredible, especially in the 70s and 80s, the NWA. Does it get better than that into Jim Crockett Promotions as well? Even WCW during the Monday Night Wars had their run. Huge difference between the WWF and the NWA and the territories. Northern wrestling, Southern wrestling, West Coast, East Coast. Smaller venues, bigger venues, ethnic populations, ethnic pro wrestlers, different things that mattered in this business. And you went to the demographics. Not all the libtards and what they're trying to do today and push agendas even in these companies. And no offense, man, kayfabe, if you don't like it, change the fucking channel. I apologize for cussing. I'm getting off here on part 2. Rather than banding together to repel his invasion, they bickered amongst themselves and kept their heads firmly planted in the sand while Vince Jr. planted the WWF flag across the country, changing the face of professional wrestling forever. Of the 20 regional promoters operating throughout the country in 1984, fewer than 5 remained by 89. And just to give you where I was, in 1984, I'm in my early 20s, 21 years old, 22 years old, 1989, still in my late 20s, just to tell you how long I've been around in this business. The old man brand, as I say, the over 50 and, dare I say, over 60 demo god. And that's right, still getting it in, still holding it down, keeping it real and maintaining. That's right, remember that, because you know, and you know that I know, that you're watching. WrestleMania, which we just came out of a couple of weeks ago, of WrestleMania 40. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, even though we're past 420. So here we go. If there was any one moment that defined the success of the WWF, cementing its position at the top of the wrestling ladder, it was WrestleMania. Now, before that, the advent of MTV, the Rock and Wrestling Connection, the war to settle the score, the brawl to settle it all, classic stuff for back in the day. And what's really led into WrestleMania and Saturday night's main event and the whole cartoon era of the WWF characters, which I really didn't like, but it was entertaining. It was what it was, and that's when I was gravitating even more with NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions and the fading, dying days of the territories, Mid-Atlantic, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Florida Championship Wrestling, the UWF World Class Championship Wrestling, the AWA, All the different territories, I really miss those days. Even Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling. Pehe oi mele hini kane pupule wiki wiki. Aloha and mahalo to all my brothers. Where were we? My mind's like a lazy Susan. You know it'll come back around. Truth to tell, Vince Jr. had actually been thinking about it for a long time as a new way to put the WWF on the map. The idea had its roots in McMahon's perception of wrestling. He knew that the WWF was in the entertainment business. This is where it all started, fans. That's why you're here to learn about this. Much like Broadway and Hollywood were. And so, borrowing from their example, he began planning attractive main events and bringing in celebrities who were, in his word, hip. Who could add to the event and help make it into the entertainment? Soon, Vince Jr. began pulling together in the elements and all for the elements of WrestleMania, the original, WrestleMania 1, bringing in the likes of Hulk Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter, the Iron Sheik, and celebrities such as Muhammad Ali, Liberace, and Billy Martin. But Vince Jr. has always been open to new ideas. He encourages his staff to give him creative input. It was in that atmosphere that I went to Vince with an idea, and not me personally. Wendy Richter versus the Fabulous Moolah. Though in reality it became Captain Louis Albano, one of my mentors, one of my people that I looked for knowledge and to pick his brain, versus Cyndi Lauper. Girls just want to have fun. Girls, they want to have fun. Girls. So the boys, man. But no, too early? Too soon? Too late? That's why I tell you to go out and do your due diligence and research, because it's tough to find that MTV scores and the brawl to settle it all, war to settle the score that really set up for WrestleMania 1. Girls just want to have fun, how about that for a segue? Maybe I should explain how that came about. It started a few years before on a plane from Puerto Rico. No, hold on, man, it's a joke. As I always say, lighten up, man, kayfabe. There I was just sitting there when a young lady came over. Cripes, I said, or something that sounded like it. It's Cyndi Lauper. She introduced herself and said she'd been a wrestling fan all her life, and then asked if I would like to be in a video she was making in her big hit, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That's right, Captain Lou was in that video. And a little sidebar, because that's why you're here, my relations to what goes on in the business and that most people in the IWC don't have. At one point, working with Sheldon Goldberg, New England Championship Wrestling, the legendary historian Sheldon Goldberg. Go out and Google it. Go Google it. No, don't go Google it. DuckDuckGo it. Use DuckDuckGo. It's more privacy. And for the NWA New England with the late, great Boston bad boy, Tony Rumble, I had the opportunity to work and meet Captain Lou Albano. Again, this is the late 90s. And there was an angle that was being promoted and that we were going to work with, where I would be portrayed as Captain Lou Albano Jr. And then it would end up in a feud between the captain and myself. Needless to say, it didn't materialize, but just the thought and being offered and approached and it being talked about and comparing me as a new school Albano to the old school is something that they can't take away from me, that I'll never forget. I wish it would have worked out. The captain had moved on at that point, but it was worth talking about. While we were filming the video, this is Captain Lou talking, a sort of merging of the worlds of wrestling and rock. Rowdy Roddy Piper saw an opportunity to create some mischief. He asked me to appear on his TV show, Piper's Pit, which is where I got my idea for Chaos Corner and used to do it live in the ring. For what I thought was going to be a straight interview. And then we had, of course, Captain's Corner, Captain Lou Albano. Chaos Corner, Albano, tomato, potato. He started egging me on about male supremacy and being a bit chauvinistic anyway. I took the bait and made some rather rash remarks like women are garbage and only good for having babies and cleaning the house. We know that's not true, but it's the storyline, man. This is story time. Well, that tore it. To make it worse, one night down at Madison Square Garden, I ran into Cindy and we started in. Again, I said some intemperate things like you were just a dirty little broad before you met me, and so on. Cindy wasn't going to take it, so she fired back. Tell you what, fat man, I'm going to put a woman wrestler up against one of yours. And if my woman wins, you're going to have to apologize and admit women are at least as good as men, maybe even better. Hey, listen, biblically, woman was created from the rib of man, not to walk behind him or in front of him, but to walk beside him. That's biblical. Do your research. That's why you're here. So I can agree with Cyndi Lauper on that one. Remember the time frame here. We are in the early, middle, and late 80s. The battle between the sexes. Before I get onto that, let me throw this little tidbit of information. There's no truth to the rumor that Cyndi Lauper is Captain Lou's daughter. Yes, he played her father in all those videos. She bop, we bop, he bop. No. Girls just want to have fun. Time after time. And The Goonies, the legendary cult film, and her real mother played the mom in The Goonies. But I was just acting, artistic license or something like that, Captain Lou said. Cindy picked Wendy Richter to carry her banner, a young lady out of Texas who was then rising in the WWF ranks. My choice was a natural, again, Captain Lou to quote, Fabulous Moolah, the woman's champion. You guys know that I had dinner on more than one occasion with Moolah and Mae Young. Two ladies that were incredible, impeccable. They treated me like gold. They actually wanted my daughter, my youngest daughter, to come down to the camp. And she was only like 12 or 13 at the time. Well, I don't know the stories and how true they are, but they treated us like gold, and I never did send my daughter to camp. She's now a registered nurse. I'm just giving you history. This is what you get that no other podcaster, and again, this isn't a podcast, can relate to the fans, to you guys. That's why this channel is unique in itself. Once I persuaded Vince to include the Moolah Richter match on the first WrestleMania, I had to go out and publicize it to make it pay off. I went on the Letterman show. David Letterman was the best late night host in the history of television. Johnny Carson, David Letterman. Not Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, Arsenio Hall, or any of the ilk like that. Letterman was priceless. And wouldn't you know it, a whole bunch of women's livers started picketing me and boozing in the audience, and booing and boozing. Captain Lou was boozing. I told Letterman that they were really calling out, Lou, 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 not boo, boo, boo. I have the body women love and men envy. Needless to say, it went over like stale pizza, which isn't that bad, or cold pizza. To top it off, Wendy Richter won, and I had to eat my words. But all in all, it was a successful promotion, and it added to the success of WrestleMania 1. So although Vince Jr. was the man behind the promotion, I feel I had a large part in turning it into the major promotion that it became. I agree, Captain. WrestleMania became the standard for wrestling. It's Super Bowl, as we just witnessed in one of the best WrestleManias ever, in WrestleMania 40, the return of The Rock, the Bloodline, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, the finishing of the story, so on and so forth. And made World Wrestling Federation #1 in the world of wrestling. As we move on here, 24 minutes in, part 2, this crazy world we call pro wrestling, and the glue that holds it all together. WCW. Wrestling takes a turn for the better in the ratings. It's debatable. WrestleMania made the WWF not just with the publicity, which McMahon played for all it was worth, but because its coverage established the WWF as truly worldwide. Now, McMahon was able to continue his onslaught against the other promoters using television as its primary weapon. This time, unlike what happened in wrestling's earlier golden age back in the 1950s, the original golden age, as I said in part 1, the advent of television, cable, etc. McMahon used the medium instead of the other way around. The new cable channels were scrambling for programming that McMahon was able to provide, even if he had to buy up the airtime to shut out the competition, which is what he did. Remember that. You guys know the story. Do your due diligence, do your research like I do here for the show. As more and more promoters folded up their tents and faded into the sunset, the WWF, that's the territories, which again, I really don't like that, but the territories are basically back here in the independent scene here in 2024. It really is. The independents are the new school territories of the old school days and old school territories. Think about it. Do your research. The WWF filled the void with its shows, which were now telecast on every minted cable channel. The notable exception was ESPN, which carried wrestling from Jim Crockett's NWA circuit. Crockett was the only promoter left to carry the banner against the WWF. All the other had gotten out. Also gone were Vern Gagne's once powerful AWA in the Midwest and Fritz Von Erich's world-class championship wrestling in Texas. Crockett's North Carolina-based organization became by default the NWA, which it was before that. Come on, get your facts straight. His stars were equal to those to the WWF, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, and others of equal stature. But the trouble was that nobody outside of Charlotte knew them, which is bullshit. That's BS. That's not true. The WWF's monopolization of cable kept them off the tube. Crockett soldiered on anyway, losing money hand over handstand. Hand over handstand. And here's where wrestling comes into it with Ted Turner, WTPS, which I was thankful for at the time. It looked like McMahon held all the cards and could dictate terms to television networks. Turner tries to take charge, most of which were so eager to keep their wrestling program that they rolled over on his command. That's very true. All except for Ted Turner of the Turner Broadcasting System, TBS, which is currently we're at the home of AEW and TNT and TBS. Rumor had it Turner was upset with Vince Jr.'s demands for time slots, or that he was pissed with McMahon for buying up some of Crockett's talent, which was now showing on TBS. Whatever the reason, Turner decided to declare war on McMahon and bought up Crockett's promotional territory. Hence WCW, NWA to JCP to WCW. According to McMahon, Turner called to gloat about his new acquisition, and you guys know this famously, announcing that he was now in the wrestling business. Good, said McMahon. We're in the entertainment business, and this is where it all started. And McMahon hung up the phone. While Turner had bought Crockett's business, he hadn't bought the NWA designation. At least according to what remained of the loose alliance of regional promoters from the territory. They used Turner for his use of the NWA initials. I worked for several of those NWA territories. That's my history. That made no never mind to Turner. He just changed the initials to WCW as in World Championship Wrestling. It was, after all, already the name of his #1 TV show on Saturday nights. Those were good times. It turned into an all-out war between the two moguls. And although Turner lost money for the first 8 years, this man never blinked. Kind of like TK, deep pockets, right? Tony Khan, come on, AEW. Having accomplished his primary purpose, preventing McMahon and the WWF from monopolizing cable TV wrestling, Turner was also creating his own programming for TBS, a superstation that beamed its signals all across the country. With Turner's WCW, McMahon was faced for the first time with the WWF not being the top wrestling dog. And with the defections of some of his top stars from the ranks, it seemed as if the standard wrestling good guy versus bad guy scenario, however you guys want to pronounce it, as we move on here, stand by, had run out of steam. Who knows? We see where it is now. After 4 decades, it suffered from thematic exhaustion. So he hit upon a new plan to pump up interest and work a twist on the old routine. He cast himself as a bad guy and started a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is McMahon Jr. we're talking about. This struck a responsive chord among the fans and shot the WWF and its new Raw is War show back to the top. Today, the war between wrestling promoter titans pits Turner's money against Vince's ingenuity. Remember the time frame where we are here. We are in the late 80s going into the early 90s, into the middle 90s, and into the Monday Night Wars. Here in the Time Machine on Chaos Corner for story time with the GOC. That's me. And although Turner can always outspend Vince, much like Tony Khan right now in AEW can compete, you see the correlation even here in 2024, even though we're going back 25 years, 35 years ago. Vince can always fight back with new ideas, newfangled plot lines, and outrageous gimmicks. McMahon cut deals right and left to keep Turner out of the top arenas. Turner's response was to start his own pay-per-view shows, cluttering the already crowded pay-per-view schedule and diluting the impact of WrestleMania. The two soon began a game of anything you can do, I can do better. Kind of like what's happening right now, but TK's not competing. Just to make it relatable to you guys and gals. Take the WWF's Monday Night Raw program, for instance. It had always been a huge success, a showcase of sorts for the WWF and a major promo venue for the pay-per-view events. Turner countered by moving his own show to Monday nights, calling it Monday Nitro. Then Turner did what every promoter has done from time immemorial. He started rating the WWF's roster for stars. That's what's going on right now in 2024. The Monday Night Wars were the resurgence of pro wrestling. Now, this is in the 90s. At this point, I'm already in my middle to late 30s, mid-30s. Already balls deep, pardon the expression, in this industry as a talent myself. Still serving my 25 years behind the walls and chasing the worst of the worst around the country for different high courts and for Dr. D, David Schultz, pro wrestling's original bad boy. Let that sink in. Just giving you the history, giving you the facts as I know them. First to come over was Hulk Hogan, who had to change his name to Hollywood Hogan in the face of a lawsuit by the WWF when it claimed rights to the original name. Turner changed Hogan's persona as well, turning him into a bad guy. WCW ratings went through the roof, and Monday Nitro passed Raw as War in the ratings for the first time, hence the whole 83 weeks, Eric Bischoff, so on and so forth. Really a great time. The NWA, too sweet, so on and so forth. It really was incredible what was going on during that era. Most of you guys were either, and gals, were either young children, teenagers if you're lucky, unlike me, who was already 10, 12, 15 years into the business, learning from the legends and the greats and being able to work with them. I'm truly blessed and fortunate, and that's why I pass on my knowledge and stories and history to you. Wow. Monday Night Raw's War and Monday Nitro. Let that marinate. Let's move on here on story time. We're only 30 minutes in on part 2. Here we go. Again, middle to late 90s. The ECW and the rest of the federations. You knew I was coming here, right? You'd think that with the WWF and WCW so dominant, there'd be no room left for over any other organizations, including where I worked for the NAWA, the North American Wrestling Alliance, where all these stars from ECW came from and started their careers, where I was commissioner for over 20 years, the longest reign in pro wrestling history, where I took over for the living legend at the time, Bruno Sammartino. I took over his office, held that office for 20 years of the NAWA, and now currently it transitioned to Mr. USA Tony Atlas. Let that marinate. Bruno Sammartino, the GOC Big Daddy, and Tony Atlas, running places like the Westchester County Civic Center and every other large organization and arena inside of the greater Northeast New England tri-state area, trying to compete with the WWF and WCW for short success, coming out of the UWF and Sports Channel, and so on and so forth. They really made a run, but again, persona non grata, and this is when ECW was starting to fold, and WCW as well. So let that marinate where I was in my career and working for the NWA territories as well. Just want to give you that relation. As I said, you'd think the WWF and WCW were so dominant there was no room for any other organizations. But you thought wrong. Today, remember the time frame here, we're going back 30 years. It seems that everyone and their kid brother has set up a wrestling territory, especially here in 2024, current day. That's the truth. See how history always repeats itself and matters to today's product? As the two major organizations changed their storylines from a focus on blood and simulated maimings to more convoluted plots and juvenile raunchiness, more busy valets and managers, and more human action figure acrobatics, they left a void. Hardcore wrestling. The way it used to be, with lots of blood, weapons, and over-the-top violence was left behind, but not for long. The organization that best exploited the void left by the WWF and WCW was Eastern Championship Wrestling. That's right, the ECW. ECW presented alternatives to the fare offered by the WWF and WCW. Harder storylines, lots of blood, plenty of weapons, and violence that changed this business, let's face it. ECW began its life in a bingo hall in South Philly in the early 90s, the creation of Todd Gordon and the wrestler Eddie Gilbert. When Gilbert left, he was succeeded by wrestling visionary Paul Heyman. That's right, the wise man. In an earlier WCW life, Heyman had been known as Paul E. Dangerously. Heyman changed the E in the ECW from Eastern to Extreme. He bought infomercials on major TV, major markets, in the wee hours of the morning, and brought the newly named Extreme Championship Wrestling organization to the attention of millions of fans who were hungry for the old-time violence of the territory days. While the roster of the ECW carried several names familiar to wrestling fans, Terry Funk, Bam Bam Bigelow, Rick Rude, among others, its hard-edged characters like the Sandman, Sabu, Taz, and strippers working as ring valets, that brought it a big following. Big enough for the ECW, which began in a bingo hall to graduate to pay-per-views. The Dudley Boys, Tommy Dreamer, New Jack, the list goes on and on. ECW has become a semi-major organization. Though not quite in the league of the WWF and WCW, it has proven that there is room for others. Now the number of wrestling affiliations has begun to mushroom, including the Century Wrestling Alliance, right here in New England, that I was fortunate enough to work for. The International Wrestling League, the United States Wrestling Association, aka the USWA, and even vestigial remnants of the old NWA territories, which I worked for several, as I've stated. You know, I could give you different names that have worked for the CWA, ECW, the USWA. We could run through some of the rosters in the early years. ECW had Bam Bam Bigelow, Chris Candido, Shane Douglas, Tommy Dreamer, Spike Dudley, Balls Mahoney, the Dudley Boys, Sabu, the Sandman, Al Snow, RVD, Taz, CWA, Century Wrestling Alliance, Abdullah the Butcher, Tony Atlas, King Kong Bundy, Lumberjack Rick Fuller, El Mascarado, the Metal Maniac, Curtis Slam Dog, Vic Steamboat, Kevin Sullivan, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, just to name a few. And the USWA lineup consisted of many stars as well. Brickhouse Brown, Brian Christopher, a.k.a. who would go on to be Grandmaster Sexay, Superstar Bill Dundee, J.C. Ice, Jerry the King Lawler, Mabel, Dirty Dutch Mantel, Akeem Muhammad, Kareem Olajuwon, Sir Mo, Wolfie D. The list goes on and on. Just wanted to give you a short list We don't want to make this forever. This is part 2 of this crazy world we call pro wrestling, the glue that holds it all together. This is the least that you need to know on part 1 and part 2 of Storytime with Chaos Corner. Wrestling promoters are lineal descendants of old-time carny promoters. The NWA was wrestling's first major organization. The McMahons, Jess, Vince Sr., and Vince Jr. are wrestling's first family of promoters. McMahon Jr., through cable TV and WrestleMania, made the WWF the premier wrestling organization in the world. And see where we are all these years later. Ted Turner used his Superstation TBS and WCW to challenge the WWF in an all-out head-to-head war for promotional supremacy, to where it still goes on today because Tony Khan and AEW are aired on TBS and TNT to carry on that legacy of what Turner did way back when. Besides the 2 major wrestling organizations, which back then, NWA into Jim Crockett Promotions into WCW, and the WWF into the WWF into WWE. And let's not forget the unbelievable organizations of the AWA, World Class Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Florida Championship Wrestling, Bill Watts' UWF, even the Savoldis and ICCW, West Coast, East Coast, Canada, Stampede Wrestling, even Luchadors, AAA, CMLL, of course, over in the land of the rising sun, New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, what came out of a lot of different organizations into the late 90s, early 2000s, Ring of Honor, TNA, TNA Impact, whatever you want to call it, Evolve, even later on, and what's going on currently in the independent pro wrestling scene, including Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. And as I said, besides the 2 major wrestling organizations, there are dozens of other affiliations on the wrestling landscape today, whether it was 25 years ago, 50 years ago, or current today in 2024. I went a little longer here on part 2. I can't thank you guys and gals, and especially my exclusive members of the Chaos Squad, for being here. I truly have a lot of fun. Again, this is my distraction, my stress reliever, my motivation, my passion, and especially the distraction from today's current events. Again, I can't thank you guys enough. Can I hydrate before I go, man? I did like an hour and a half of live shows. No live to tape, but it's still on the same day. So it's live, man. Don't debate me. Stay tuned to my community page and all my social media platforms. We're going to continue to push out this content and bringing back today this date in pro wrestling history, which is a huge success on this channel, and the classic videos that I have down here in the vault in Chaos Chronicles. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.